There we are. Hello, everyone. Welcome. I am Briar Harvey. This is the Neurodiversity Media Network, and we are here today for apparently not on Facebook, y'all, but it's fine.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure that out.
Don't worry about it. We'll just remove
Okay.
them. And what are we doing? We're doing Starship
Starship
Troopers.
Troopers.
Starship
Okay.
Troopers.
I think we're
Movies,
good.
Munchies, Starship Troopers. We'll see what happens. I don't care. It's fine. It's Lionsgate. It's all whatever.
A lot of weird energy out there.
Yeah.
We're about to bring the weird energy here.
Right. I mean, I've already picked a fight this morning about Zoom and terms and conditions. So, let's do it. Let's talk about fascism.
Let's just
Because
dive right in.
in case you've missed it, that is in fact what this movie is about. And I feel like, much like Barbie, there were some things that people missed. It's fine. It's fine. All right.
Yeah.
So this movie was made in 1997 with a budget of $110 million. The box office take was $121 million, which y'all is not considered a commercial success. If it doesn't make
barely breaking even.
Right. If it doesn't at least make 1.5 times what it cost to make, then we don't actually consider it a box office success. However, we are in the land of cult classics, and as we all know, this movie has gone on to do some things. How many sequels are we on now? 4, 5? Quite a few. Quite a few.
Lot.
Shockingly, even though it did not do that well at the time, the Rotten Tomato meter score is in fact 70%. So the critics got it, at least.
They understood it. They got where they were coming from.
They got it. It was nominated for several Golden Satellite Awards and the Stinkers Award, which sadly it lost to Batman.
To Batman's nipples. It lost to Batman's nipples.
Batman and Robin. Not just any Batman, let's be clear. Batman and Robin.
With the nipples.
The nipples. You're right.
Nipples.
It's totally the nipples. You can stream this film on Netflix.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
All right. We will not talk about the cast generally, except to say that Casper Van Dien was, I believe, in his late 20s, playing a high schooler here.
Mm-hmm.
Neil Patrick Harris, Patrick Muldoon, also in his late 20s, playing a high schooler here. Neil Patrick Harris was mid 20s, but he at least looked like
He's
a high
baby
schooler.
face.
Right. He looked very young here, comparatively speaking. Yeah. But I was really, it was such a, I mean, the casting was whatever.
It's one of the most egregious, one of the most egregious, just let's pretend they're high schoolers I've seen in a while. Really
long
we're
time.
We're all just nodding and rolling our eyes here.
That these are 18-year-olds off to boot camp.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Right.
Yeah.
This week, I did give, speaking of AI, I did give the question of this movie to the particular ChatGPT thread that I have trained to write like me. So it did slightly better this week.
Exciting.
Starship Troopers, 1997, is a satirical science fiction action film directed by Paul Verhoeven. Set in the distant future, the story follows a group of high school friends who enlist in the military to fight against a deadly alien species known as arachnids, threatening humanity. The protagonist, Johnny Rico, Casper Van Dien, rises through the military ranks amidst intense battle scenes and gruesome encounters with the arachnids. The film blends hyperbolic military propaganda and action packed sequences to critique militarism and fascism, designed as an outer space bug hunt. Despite its appearances as a typical sci fi action movie, Starship Troopers is a subversive take on war and society's acceptance of authoritarianism. ChatGPT got it.
Well, when we first talked about doing this, we talked about how people missed the point when they first saw it. They missed it, that it was satirical, it was about fascism. And so when I watched it, because the first time I ever watched it was in preparation for this, and I took notes and I made a list of just a couple of things that would have helped people notice that this was satirical and it was about fascism. Specifically, that it's about fascism, right?
Like, and over and over.
Right. And so one of the things was nobody paying attention to any of the promo videos?
Yeah.
No, nobody was paying attention to those? Okay. No, you missed those altogether. Okay. Everybody looked right over the fact that you had to file a license to have children. Everybody missed that only people who had served could vote. Like these are like,
to be fair,
basic fascism things.
Heinlein made this a little bit more complicated in the book. You could earn citizenship in other ways, but service guaranteed citizenship.
Okay. And
I don't actually remember that part. Like, how could you earn citizenship in the book? Like,
I don't know. You read it, not me.
I don't remember that. Like, I just read it, and I'm like, did I miss that? I probably did. I don't remember.
Maybe that was an addition then, because my understanding was
he was always adding shit. I don't know.
Right. That there were ways to gain citizenship through, like, service is a murky, hazy thing. And even here, it's hazy. What is service? Who serves? Is it just military service? Are you serving if you are police or fire right? EMS?
Yeah, so at least
maybe
in this universe, like, that's the thing why it's like so overtly fascist in the book, though. Even though, like, you get the feeling, and I'm pretty sure Heinlein was pro, like, what he was talking about. I'm like, my dude, you just fought against this. Like, Heinlein served in World War II. You just did this. And you're like, yeah, let's do this here. Let's do this again in America. And I'm like, okay. Interesting take on that. But yeah, he makes it kind of more overt in the book, and it's honestly, I feel like Paul Verhoeven got the point better than Heinlein did. Like, it's
well, remember, we're writing for, I'm going to be very honest with you here, a slightly more sophisticated audience. It's the 1950s. You gotta bang people over the head with it now. So there were probably, and Heinlein in particular is one of those authors that made very specific pop culture references that if you weren't reading it at the time of publication, probably were lost. And so it may seem as though this was advocating for it. I'm 100% sure he was not actually advocating for these things. But we're writing it that way so that we're clear on context. But it's been how many years? Almost
half a century, more than half a century.
More than half a century since this book was published. We're missing some of the finer nuance, I'm sure.
I tried to find like some articles on like takes on it from the 1950s, which I mean, I can't remember if it was banned, but it was definitely not
I'm
loved.
100%.
I'm sure it was.
I mean, I love Heinlein. I I have a weird just love for him. I read him way too early, and he was my favorite author when I was a kid, which says a lot about me.
Explains some things.
Right? He has some weird sex fascinations, but if we just gloss over those and like just don't worry about it, it's he brings up some really interesting ideas. Specifically, like the way that he has, say, the teacher, who is also um, Ratzinger. What's his name? Ratchik. Ratchik. In who
Red check.
Ratchik, who like in the movie takes the place of two different characters from the book, just combines it. But the way that he like soliloquies about civic responsibility and all of that stuff, like even knowing that like I don't agree with a lot of the things that he's saying, I'm almost like, yeah, I mean yeah, like he just has a way with words that you're just like you want to agree with him even though like no, I don't agree with this.
Now, there's some evidence. You can read it and decide either way. Heinlein was probably pretty anti-Semitic.
Yeah.
But not a fascist. So
He was definitely problematic.
Right.
As pretty much everyone from that era was.
Right. And this is something I talk about a lot. When we look at things that are cultural legacies, we really have to view them from the history of the time. And if you watched Oppenheimer, you'll know that we were still pretty anti-Semitic as a country here in the United States well into the 60s. Like this is not new or even really culturally unacceptable. And let's be very honest that we didn't get into World War II because of what the Nazis were doing to the Jews.
No.
That's not why we entered the war.
Right.
So, the fact that Heinlein fought doesn't negate any personal sentiment that he might have had.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, this story really is very much about what we are willing to sacrifice in the name of the greater good. And I think the question needs to be asked, what is the greater good? I don't know. I don't have an answer for that.
And that's a thing that, no two random people are going to agree on.
Yeah.
The greater good is completely ambiguous depending on who you're speaking to, their personal values, their personal experiences. It's going to be different.
Like, I don't know how, I mean, that's kind of what strife, like human conflict is always about, isn't it? Like, ultimately, is we can't agree on what's the most important.
Right. And so then we can't agree on anything.
No, so it becomes about how do we have a conversation about those things? What allows us to determine or dictate those mores, right? And this movie, which they missed the point on, is very much about having a conversation about those things from a very masculine point of view, because as my husband points out, you don't just randomly throw boobs in there if you don't want men to go and watch the movie.
Right.
And the shower scene
Right.
is so unnecessary in terms of plot or movement or anything,
Right.
that we only have those boobs to get men in the theater. It's a butts
Right.
in seats technique, right?
Yes. Here's some boobs. Please come to the theater. We
Yep.
have brought you boobs.
We've brought you boobs and lots of guns. You get
And
to watch
lots of guns.
Although for some reason, for a civilization that's been fighting these bugs for essentially forever, they don't have a gun that can kill a bug without pumping fewer than 100 rounds into it.
That's a really excellent point. And I think this comes to Heinlein, yeah? Because the time
Good.
this book
I
was
want an
written,
answer.
yeah, I'll let you. Give me just a second, because the time this book was written was prior to the space race, and the tech is indicative of high space travel, but we're still using projectile weapons.
Yeah. Also, okay, so one of my and my spouse's pet peeves about this, because we both read it when we were pretty young, and so like it kind of like those ideas kind of stick in your brain. And one of the coolest ideas in the book is the pods that the people get, the soldiers get projected, like basically like they're in an egg. They're in an egg, and they are in a full mech bodysuit. Like they like you've seen the videos from the robotics on YouTube and stuff, like where they are designing, mech suits so that you can lift way heavier than a person could lift, or go fast at some point. I mean, we're working on it, right? So take that to its ultimate conclusion of it works, it's amazing, it protects you, like, but like once it runs out of juice, once it runs out of power, you are not going anywhere. You will literally die in this thing because it's so heavy that you can't get out. Like, so you're in a mech suit, and then you're inside of an egg, and you're basically being shunted out of the spaceship onto like the sort of upper atmosphere of the planet. And like the egg sort of floats you down a little bit, and once it hits atmosphere, it starts breaking apart, and your suit has like jets in it so that you can kind of slow your descent. And it's sort of like Rocketeer-esque. And you're
we just did not have the money for this. The budget was 110 million. We did not have the budget for this.
But it would be so cool, and it makes so much more sense. Okay, like these suits that they have, they're like, no, like, don't just shoot at it. Like, that's useless. Like, don't do that. You're wasting bullets. They dropped bombs, like, from the air. They would hover above the ground and, like, use those jets to kind of, like, careen off of buildings and stuff and just bomb things. Like, little bombs.
I'm definitely hearing the book is better. Read the book. There's tech in here. I mean, that's always the case. But definitely read this book. But I think the bullets then are representative of that force and power that we're attempting to display here. It has nothing to do with bullets. It has everything to do with how many can we use.
Yep. Right. I will say though, in regards to the book, one review from the time basically said I think Heinlein forgot to write like a plot. He got so, which he often does. He gets
So that's reassuring. Like,
he gets so like maybe this is why I latched on to him when I was a kid, because an undiagnosed autistic kid, because he loves details. He loves giving you all of the details. He's like, and this is how this part of the military works, and this is how this gun works. I'm going to give you all the details of it. And I'd like just so many details of so many things. Like,
And zero plot.
zero plot.
okay, so it's sandwich. There's like a chapter of plot at the beginning to hook you, and then we go through all of basic, all of like officer school, and then we're back at plot, and then it's done. Like, that's it.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, and I was like, watching this movie, and I'm thinking, how in the world did all of these high school students become high-ranking officers?
People
in
die a
like
lot.
year?
About 2 years? Because,
Yeah.
people.
Like,
And
NPH's character, like, right off the bat, he is a high-ranking officer. He has no, like, did he even go through training? All we know is he graduated, and then suddenly he was an officer, and
games
psychic.
in theory, so you get to go and play some games and do some theory, and then suddenly everybody salutes you. That's how that one works.
They do mention a lot in the book of just how fast people die once the war starts back up.
So that's another thing that, and I blame Highland. I blame Heinlein for this, and then I blame Verhoeven. The math doesn't work.
The math doesn't math, no.
With as many people as would be required, you actually can't prevent breeding, or you're doing it in test tubes, because
you run out.
Right. We run out of human ammunition to throw at this problem.
You have to have fodder for the war machine.
Correct. Additionally, when the bug asteroid hits Buenos Aires, the population there is actually not that much more than it is today. I actually think it might have been less. I can't remember. I looked it up and now I've forgotten. But there was not equivalent to the number of people that we need to throw at this kind of problem. And that's the part of fascism in particular that is so frightening. It is the bodies that are expendable in order to feed the war machine.
Right. And
I mean,
you would assume that in this type of fascist society where there is a war machine that needs to be fed, that potentially, the poor people's kids are just being conscripted into the war machine. Like, that would be the assumption, or people who had children without having the appropriate license.
Yeah.
And because you can't keep people from having kids, right? Because people do it by accident all the time.
In this world, I'm sure we're sterilizing, right?
Yeah. You sterilize everyone at whatever age. I don't know, but you sterilize everyone, and then you just unsterilize them as they are allowed.
But yeah, it doesn't solve the numbers problem.
Yeah.
Right.
I think that is primarily, I don't know, like, there are issues in both the book and the movie, but like, I think there is some context in the book that kind of makes it make a little bit more sense, but you're still like, it still doesn't quite add up.
Right. And whenever you're reading or watching a work of fiction, there has to be, like, even if it's not fantasy or science fiction, even if it's just, realistic fiction, there has to be something in in this world that you're experiencing that you can relate to, that makes you say, okay, this is believable. I can believe everything that's happening based off of these things, right? That I can believe in. And for me, I lost, this is potentially ridiculous, but I lost that complete sense of I can buy into this, I can believe this in Dizzy's death scene. Okay? Because she is dying and, you know, Rico's like, oh, don't go, you can't leave me, whatever. And she says to him on her deathbed, it was all worth it because she got him for one night. Are you
Yeah,
fucking
we
kidding
definitely
me?
need to talk about the women in this.
Oh,
So
Are you
shockingly,
kidding? She got to have sex with
and
him one
and
time,
I
and
want to
that
just
made
observe.
everything worth it.
I just want to observe that by the standards of the Bechdel test, this movie actually passes. The Bechdel
Okay.
test requires that
Yeah.
two women have a conversation that is not about a man, and
Mhm.
Carmen and her co-pilot have a whole minute about flying ships, right? When they're on
Okay.
that shuttle. So they're this 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 just
Bizarre.
proves the validity of the Bechdel test as a barometer for whether or not a film is feminist in nature, because the women in this movie do not have a whole lot of agency, right? They're just
Like
there for the male gaze.
I I don't like to, speak badly of actresses or like whatever, but what's her name? The main Carmen,
Denise
um
So
Richards.
Carmen's
Denise,
Denise
Rich-
Richards. You
Denise
don't
Rich-
see her breasts, by the way.
you don't.
Mm-mm,
But
mm-mm.
eyes are just so dead. Like the whole movie, they're just dead. And I
Yeah,
just,
blank shark eyes.
yeah,
They're
like
just
it's
dead.
unsettling. Every single time she comes on screen, it's just unsettling. And I don't, it, because she doesn't really serve any purpose aside from being the, like, the girl to get for him, like for Rico.
Right.
And maybe that's, I don't know, maybe she's fucking brilliant, like maybe Denise Richards is not a bad actress. Maybe she's really fucking brilliant and just did the dead eyes the whole time because she's like, I am selling this satire of, like, a propaganda film, like, because that's the whole thing, like the whole movie is literally done in the style of a propaganda film, um, like the same type of film that you might have actually watched in the 1930s and 40s.
Right.
They exist on the internet. Like, y'all can, like, there's not all of them, obviously, but people have saved them and uploaded them onto YouTube and other places like archives online where you can watch actual propaganda films. And it's bizarre, but maybe Denise Richards is actually amazing and just really selling that. I don't know. The fact that she's literally only there to be what the
Pretty.
hero is looking for.
I I don't know if I'd go that deep, but Denise is pretty talented. I what's the name of that movie? Wild Things? Is that the name of it? Yeah, Wild Things. That was really good. 98. That was right after that. And she's done some stuff, much like Dina Meyer. There's been some things. This is very typical, though, of women once they age
Yeah.
past hotness, anyhow. If
Right.
you're not sexually available for the male lead, then your Hollywood career has long been unlikely. And we have a few
until you're like in your 50s, at which point you can play 70.
Right.
Right.
You can be a Golden Girl.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And then you can be a villain. You can be Glenn Close, right? So
the other thing I want to say about performer in this movie, and it's not really, I don't know if it's a comment on this person's real life or not, but can you think of anything off the top of your head that you've ever seen Jake Busey play in where he was not a tool?
Oh, yeah, I'm refraining from
no, you can't. You can't.
Busey.
It's, and like everything I've seen him in.
This. Like he's kind of not a tool in this. Like, considering comparatively.
He is in the beginning.
Yeah, he is. But like by the end, you're like, you're kind of a decent person, maybe. I don't know.
Honestly, I think Ace's character had the most like character growth of any of the other characters in the movie. Like he actually had growth as a character. He went from being just a joke and a tool to actually being a decent, character that was good at, fighting,
hitting things,
leading, whatever. But nobody else really had much character development, much character growth. They were just, or not more than you would expect them to have.
I mean, unless you consider a promotion character growth.
Sure. And in what world, right? In what military world do you get your promotion because your commanding officer dies and says, now you get to lead? Like that's not how it happens.
Well, actually, field commissions happen
I was gonna say,
a lot.
Yeah, I mean, because it is in the middle of like I will say, like, I think Heinlein is absolutely writing from the perspective of like recent past. Like he's like, this is what happened to me, like in the field, in the middle of the trenches, or like storming Normandy or whatever, wherever the fuck he was. And I really feel like it's very much, I mean, right, like science fiction in general, we don't write the future, we write the present in setting, because we're making commentary on like what's happening right now, not actually like sometimes people write to imagine what could be, but mostly we're writing what's going on.
I agree. And I think the argument that he was making here was that the good guys weren't any better than the bad guys, right? That the tactics that we use to defeat the bugs here are analogous to many of the tactics that were used by the United States military, and that the bugs and the Germans are bad, but how bad? Right?
Right.
So I agree, Melissa. I think the argument here is that these are the things that we were doing and will continue to do. Fascism is easily adoptable.
Mm-hmm.
You don't realize you've gone that far until you're past it. I think is the line that we're making here. That's the through line, that we're already there, and it's harder to walk back than anyone knows.
Right.
And yet we keep not learning from history. Like, just keep on doing it.
Well, it's hard to learn from history when it can't be taught.
Yep. Also, like, I mean, like, going back to the the sort of anti-Semitic and also like just Heinlein's general issues. And honestly, I kind of feel like this is better that it's in the book because it's more overt. But the fact that they refer to the aliens as the bugs or there are like several. So in the book there's another alien race because there are many alien races in the books, and the skinnies are what they call the other ones. And just like think about that wording, right? Like think about the wording there and how racist it is in that world. Like that's really pretty racist because we're just referring to them as this, like it's an epithet, like that we're talking about these other races of.
Right. No need to dehumanize an insect because it's already
Right.
not human. So the steps that we take to destroy it are well within norms, convention, because they're already not like us.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I think that's why bugs and like insects sort of like in like that type of being is a fairly popular, and I think Heinlein had a lot to do with that, but why it's become a very popular sort of villain in science fiction, because you don't have to think about that. You don't have to think about like
Right.
how different they are. You don't have to deal with the sort of they're a little bit like us, because they're not. Like they're a hive mind. They exist as a completely alien species.
Right.
And the film, shockingly, does an incredible job highlighting this in several places. The scene where they join Radchek's platoon and the dude demolishes that bug, and you get to see it looking up at you with that one sad eyeball. Like,
The end, like
mm-hmm.
the very end, where the brains, like the brains are all experimenting on the bug that's been captured, is horrifying.
Uh-huh.
Right.
Yeah, where they're poking the brain bug with the censored. Oh yeah, that's all absolutely horrific.
Yeah. And it's definitely something that was done, right? Especially during World War II. Like there are
Absolutely.
definitely reports of those types of experiments happening on humans. But
I mean,
you know,
that's the whole reason we have a classification for it's the reason for a lot of things, but it's one of the reasons we have a classification for autistic people who don't seem as autistic, who are, acceptable socially, which we don't use Asperger's anymore, but it used to be like totally acceptable language, even though it's, named after a Nazi. But
Yeah,
yeah,
but we're not any better. Remember, this
oh
this
no,
is the United States who had Japanese and German internment camps during
mm-hmm,
World War II. Like, and
absolutely.
and I feel like that's how we draw this conclusion from this film. Like, who's the bad guy? Who's the good guy? What is good behavior? And this continues in this series and in this series of films. Like, there are a lot of questions here about what determines humanity.
yeah,
And that's a question that will continue to come up. And because the good guys and the bad guys, it's all dependent on what side you're on. That's who's the good guy and who's the bad guy, and how far can you take it as the good guy before you become the bad guy? Where's the line?
What is acceptable losses? Like what's acceptable behavior? It's why we have war crimes tribunals.
Thankfully, we don't have to figure that shit out. We just have to figure out how to eat the pink slop.
Yes.
The pink slop.
So in the movie, like when they're going through basic, they're going through the chow line, and there's this sort of pink paste thing on the line, which is
Delicious.
presumably like protein paste. I'm guessing that it's bug meat.
I don't want to think too hard about it, if I'm being very honest. When you're looking at the food in the chow line, which is, by the way, the only time we see anyone eat in this film. Thank God for that. So, our Munchies recreation this week.
Okay. Our Munchies recreation is raspberry marshmallows. So raspberry marshmallows are pretty easy to make if you have a standing mixer. If you don't have a standing mixer, just don't worry about it. Like there's literally no way that you can do this. And don't try because you'll just be sad. And a candy thermometer of some kind. You can have like the old-fashioned kind, or you can have the digital. The digital are wonderful, but my children run away with the pieces, and so I end up just using the traditional candy thermometers. So marshmallows are pretty easy. You're basically taking gelatin and blooming it, which is just mixing it with water to make it like expand, and putting that in the bowl of the mixer. And then you're making your sugar syrup. You bring sugar syrup up to 240 degrees, which is also known as softball for sugar. It's a softball temperature, which if you have, the reason it's called softball is because if you keep like a little bowl of ice water next to your pot, you can take a spoon of the sugar, dip the drip into the ice water, and when it comes out, it will form like this little putty sort of feeling ball. It's malleable still. Its sugar gets to that stage before it very quickly. You have to watch when you're doing sugar things at all, because that sugar, once it starts to get to the softball stage, it will very quickly go up and up and up, temperature-wise. Like
to
it takes
hardball stage,
and then to caramel,
which is where we make hard candy. So
yeah. So you're taking it to softball stage, and then you are turning on the mixer with the gelatin in it, turning on the mixer to like medium high, and pouring the sugar into the side of the mixing bowl. Like you're basically like running it down the side of the mixing bowl so that it doesn't spray back on you. As the mixer is running.
Cool, because the bowl is metal and you're pouring this hot sugar on a cold metal bowl.
Exactly.
Science, right. Man. It's food science, cool. Y'all.
So you're pouring the sugar into the side of the mixing bowl, and as it's going, like once you get all of the sugar in there, you turn the mixing speed up more, and once, you just kind of let that go, and then eventually you end up with something that looks like marshmallow cream. It's kind of just magic. And it just whips that sugar and gelatin up into marshmallow cream. And then you can add your, like a little bit of salt and vanilla and raspberry preserves. And I have the proportions and everything in the recipe. And then once that's all mixed together, all incorporated, you can add food coloring if you want it to be violently pink, or you can just leave it as a very soft pale pink. because that's the
Beets
color.
would probably work too.
What?
Some beet juice would
Yeah,
probably work here too.
definitely. The juice I would be careful of. So if you have beet powder, you can use
Oh,
that.
yep.
Right.
So because the raspberry preserves are already making this a softer marshmallow than like a normal marshmallow would be. It'll still hold up. It's just going to be any kind of heat is going to kind of melt this a little bit. But we're going to pour that all out into a pan that has been prepared with parchment paper and powdered sugar all over the parchment paper and as much up the sides of it as you can get. And then you pour the marshmallow into there, and then you dust the top with more powdered sugar. And then you kind of let that sit for 30 minutes or an hour to completely cool off. And then you turn it out onto a cutting board and use a shit ton of powdered sugar to cut those into pieces. You basically
that's all marshmallows are. They are
Yeah.
sugar with more sugar with different kinds of sugar mixed in.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
As cut, you just keep dredging it with more powdered sugar because that's the only way to stop the sticky.
And as some of us are autistic around here, that sticky is a real fucking problem.
I love homemade marshmallows. Like, I never thought that I liked marshmallows growing up, but homemade marshmallows are a completely different story. But it is definitely like a situation where I prepare myself that I'm going to make this, and then I'm going to clean everything really well. Because the sugar just kind of hangs around, and you have to, like, it's sticky.
It's sticky.
But yeah, and then I made those into some s'mores, which my children didn't appreciate because they didn't appreciate like the raspberry-ness. They were like, I just want regular marshmallows. Can you just make regular marshmallows? Whatever.
How very dare.
Kids ruin everything. They're delightful, but
everything.
They just don't appreciate. But yeah.
I've only had homemade marshmallows one time, and it was when you, Melissa, made them and you brought them to Starbucks one night, and they were fabulous. I think they were, maybe had you done peppermint or something?
Yeah,
it was right around Christmas, and you had done like peppermint, and I think you had meant for us to like take them home and put them in hot cocoa, and that did not happen.
It didn't make it.
I just eated that, but. Yeah, they were way better than a regular marshmallow. And so I would urge anybody to make their own homemade marshmallows from here on out. Never buy the store-bought stuff again, because everyone has time to make their own marshmallows every time they need them.
Yep.
Melissa, do you know the herbal roots of marshmallow and marshmallow root here?
Nothing to do with these marshmallows.
Absolutely. No, not these marshmallows. Absolutely not.
I don't recall at the moment the usages for marshmallow, like for marshmallow root.
I think it's good for the lungs. I think it's good for clearing up mucus. I could be wrong about those things.
Yeah,
I'm trying to. I should have asked this before we started recording it, but now I'm like, well, how did we get marshmallow?
I don't know why. I don't know why we named it that. I don't. Right. I can't. It's been a minute since food history on that subject.
It's all right. It's all right.
But. Yeah, it is.
You can look this up for the blog post. But
it's known for its high mucilaginous. Mucilaginous?
Mucilaginous, yeah.
For mucus. So yeah.
Oh, so I was right about that. Okay, awesome.
But yeah, I have to.
Like Slippery Elm. I don't know because they're stuck in my brain together. So that's don't ask. I can't remember the names of my children most of the time.
You're not
Or
taking
what I
medical
ate
advice from.
yesterday. But I can tell you apparently that marshmallow roots and Slippery Elm are great for mucus. That's what I know. Like, don't ask me.
But disclaimer: don't take medical advice from the
No, never take it.
bullshitting podcast.
No,
no. Do not take any medical advice from us. That literally
no,
ever.
God, no.
Not under any circumstances.
All right, y'all. So this has been Starship Troopers.
Yep.
Do we know what we're talking about next time? There's a whole big long list here.
I want to say, I personally want to say Birdemic.
Okie doke. Well, perhaps we can get a guest cast in for Birdemic. It'll be very exciting. Very exciting. Birdemic.
Keep inching closer and closer to the cult movies, and this one's just gonna throw us over the edge.
I'm very excited. Very excited.
Very. All right, y'all. Thank you so much for being here today. We have been Movies and Munchies. This has been the Neurodiversity Media Network. We will be back next time, apparently, with Birdemic. And I don't know, y'all. We'll see you then for Birdemic. It's going to be amazing. It's going to be fantastic. I can't wait.